Welcome. Thank you all for joining us virtually. Today we are doing our Bordeaux Blooms workshop. We've got some beautiful flowers to work with. We're working in this metallic gold 5-inch cylinder. Everyone should have a piece of chicken wire that we're going to use as our mechanic. And grab your clippers from home. So we're going to start by prepping our vase with our chicken wire. You want to take your sheet and fold hot dog style, and then fold inwards like a hamburger and round out the sides to get just this imperfect ball that will drop right into the cylinder. Now that our mechanics are prepped in our vase, we can start with our vase of flowers to get us started. You'll want to pull out your mini green hydrangea. You should have about 4 stems of these mini green hydrangea in your bucket. They look like this. What we're going to do with our mini greens is we're going to go around the edge of our vase in almost a square pattern. We've got 4 stems, so one on each side of the vase. But before we do any cutting or placing into the vase, we have to clean up our stem to make sure it is prepared to go into water. So you want to remove any low-lying leaves on any of your stems. I'm going to remove these and these, but you see these guys that are closer up to the top here, we can keep those because they're pretty. But I don't want anything below the water line of my vase. I don't want any extra leaves or petals down in the water. That is going to cause additional bacteria growth, which will cause your flowers to not last as long. So to make our first cut, you always want to cut at an angle on your stem, and you'll watch me kind of measure on my vase where I want to cut. Once I cut at an angle, I'm inserting on one side and aiming for the opposite side of the vase with my stem. I'm going to repeat that 3 times with my 4 stems of mini greens. The chicken wire is there to hold your stems in place so we can hold our shape in our arrangement, and the goal is for your stem to go through the chicken wire twice to be held nice and snug. Now that we have our 4 mini greens on the edge of our vase, we can start with our next flower, which is going to be a rose. The reason we started with our mini greens is because their stem is the largest and thickest that we're working with. So you want to put them in close to first so that it's easiest to get them in. And then same with our roses, they have a thicker, more woody stem that we're going to use as the base before we start putting in any more of our delicate flowers. Now for our roses, we have a little bit more cleanup to do on this stem. You see they have a lot of leaves going down, and we don't want any of these leaves in our water in our vase. So you want to go ahead and strip those off. You can use your clippers to cut them off, or you can pluck them off one by one. I think we are lucky with these hot pink roses. They don't have many stems on them, but many thorns on them. So just be careful though, in case you do have a thorn, you don't want to poke your finger. But go ahead and clean those off, all 3 of them. And then there is a part 2 to cleaning our roses. Roses have guard petals around the edges that are usually a little damaged, a little wrinkly, and that protects the inner petal of the rose. So you want to go ahead and clean those off, just about 1 layer. We're going to pop those off of each of our roses. I like to do all of my roses at the same time so that I can just work without stopping once I have them prepared. We've got two types of roses that we are working with today. The first one is this hot pink. You should have about 3 of them. And then you'll have 3 more of this rose, kind of like a mauvey purple, is called a purple moon rose. These guys do have a little bit of thorns on them, so be careful when cleaning them up. Use your clippers or pop them off with the sides of your thumb if you can. Same thing, we're going to take off some of the outer petals that are a little darker, a little more damaged to show off those pretty inner petals. These roses are very fresh, so they're very tight and closed right now. If you like the look of open roses, you can turn them upside down and give them a little spin between your fingers. But it is a good sign that they are tight and closed. It means that they are going to last longer and that they are more fresh. All right, so I'm going to start with my hot pink rose. It has a little bit of a bigger head. It's a little heavier, so I'm going to put this in before the smaller headed rose. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with my mini greens and measure to my vase to cut at an angle to see about the length I want my stem. And I'm going to insert that. I'm going to go in between 2 of my mini greens at an angle, aiming for the opposite side of my vase. That stem is going through 2 layers of chicken wire to hold it in place. And you'll see there, it falls over the rim in between those 2 mini greens. Not too low and still above the greens. I'm going to repeat that with the other 2 hot pink roses. I'm going to do one on the opposite side. There. And before I use my last rose, I'm going to bring in the purple moons, and I'm going to put one of those on either side as well to balance out that color. One thing I always say is it's better to not cut enough on your stem, because you can always cut again if you need to make it shorter, but you can't get any length back if you cut too short. So always play it safer when cutting your stem and leave a little extra length, and you can try to put it in and then snip some more off if you need to. So now I have one of my hot pink roses and one of my purple moon roses left. I'm going to place these kind of in the middle, kind of off to the side, but more upright. So I'll kind of group those together on this side, and I'll do the same thing with my last purple moon on this side. So now we have our roses in place, and there is a lot of empty space around the edge of our vase and in between that we're going to go ahead and use this seeded eucalyptus to start filling in and filling out our arrangement. Seeded eucalyptus is really awesome. You get a lot of bang for your buck because it has all of these arms and offshoots on the side. So if you have a nice big bushy piece like this, you'll want to break it up into multiple usable pieces so you can get the most out of it. So there you go. I'm splitting this up, and these can all be individual pieces that I can use. I want to clean, same thing with these greens. You do still want to clean up any lower lying leaves. You don't want those in our vase. So go ahead and prep all of your stems to be nice, clean, usable pieces. This guy I'm going to leave a little bushier. I like his fullness. Same with this guy. Now I'm going to put a couple of these more delicate pieces off to the side and save them for at the end for any kind of more whimsical pieces I want shooting out or to fill in any holes at the end. So I'm going to put a couple of these pieces to the side, and I'm going to start with my larger pieces. I have a large hole here in between these roses, so I'm going to go ahead and cut my greens at an angle and place in between, kind of sandwiched nicely there. And this greenery is going to poke out further than your roses, and that's okay. It's pretty. We want to see it. It doesn't need to hide down low. And I think I'm going to take my next biggest piece and I'm going to go on the opposite side of my arrangement. As I work, you'll notice me turning the vase to show the camera where I am placing items, but be sure to be turning your vase as you're working as well, so we make sure to have an all-sided arrangement with a face of flowers on all angles of the arrangement. With this piece, I'm actually going to tuck underneath of this rose. Have that kind of draping down. Same thing with this final large piece that I'm going to use right now. I'm putting kind of in between these roses with a little piece draping down. The next stems that we're going to be working with is this beautiful cotinus or smoke bush foliage. It's got this rich dark tone to it with a little bit of red in it that really plays with our hot pinks and our Bordeaux theme. Now this guy is going to require a lot of cleanup. He has a lot of linear leaves down the stem, and we really only want a cute little tuft here at the top. So I'm going to go ahead, this might feel wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to strip all of these leaves from the bottom and just leave myself this to work with. We've got about 4 pieces here. We're working with even numbers on this greenery. I'm going to do the same thing to all 4 pieces, remove all of those lower stems and leave myself with just this cute little tuft at the top to work with. All right, I've got all 4 ready. So since we're working with an even number here, I can kind of do something similar that we did with our mini greens and put one in between each mini green around the edge of the vase. But I think I'm going to do that for 2 of them, and then I'll save 2 for more in the center, sticking out a little bit more for some different movement of this color in the arrangement. I'll start with my first piece. Again, always cutting at an angle and measuring to your base to see where you want to make that cut. And then I'm going to lift this rose up and place him here, just because this rose is a little small. He needs a little help. He needs some boost in this corner over here. As we start to insert more stems, it's going to be more difficult to get your stem in. So if you're feeling any resistance, you can just kind of lightly twist your stem back and forth to push it through. But if it's still not going in and you're still feeling that resistance, just try a different angle, try a different hole, different spot. We don't want to force it so much that it snaps the stems. It's always okay to move things as we go along to make the arrangement the way you want. I'm going to go on the opposite side of where I put my first stem of smoke bush. I'm going to leave him drooping there. And then with my next two stems, I'm actually going to go more in the middle to fill out our center. So I am going to leave the stems a little longer than I did on the edge because there is more space difference between where I'm aiming in the center of the arrangement versus aiming towards the side of the wall. So I'm leaving that stem a little bit longer and still inserting at an angle. Here we are. So now we're going to move on to our final large stem that we're working with today. This is ornamental cabbage or kale. It's a really cool fall flower right now. It lasts a very long time and it just fills things out really nicely. And I'm going to show you a little trick to turn this into a more showy flower arrangement. You want to just carefully pull these leaves down a little bit as you go around. They should move fairly easy so you can be gentle. And that's just going to open up your kale to be really showy for our arrangement. Since we're working with just a single stem, you want to look for a place where you have a large gap, maybe not directly in the center, maybe still off to the side a little bit, and let this guy kind of show off himself, but still not being a bullseye in the center of our arrangement. So he has a thick stem. We'll definitely want to cut a lot off of him at an angle. And then you see I have a pretty large gap right here, so I'm going to try and stick him there. Now with our kale, because he is such a large, thick stem and large head, you may actually need to stick him in more upright than at an angle because he's not going to go in between the other stems. You may also, it's okay if you need to take some off of the bottom or cut a little shorter. We want to make sure that he gets in there. The next stems that we're going to be working with is our spray roses. These are hot pink spray roses. You should have about 3 stems of these guys. And they are going to require a lot more cleanup than some of our other stems. We've got a lot of laterals and leaves lower down that we don't want, and it's going to prevent us from inserting this into our vase. So we want to go ahead and remove those. This guy is a little broken, so I'm going to take that big piece all the way down to this cute little delicate piece. It seems weird, seems like we're getting rid of a lot of flower, but it will be easier and make sense in the end with the placement. Same thing, this guy has a cute little cluster at the top. I'm going to go ahead and just remove all of those leaves at the bottom. Same thing I've been doing with every stem is I cut at an angle and I measure to my vase to make sure I am hitting the other side of where I want it to be. And I'm going to insert, got this green spot right here. I want this color to come through next to some of my purple moons. So I'm going to put some of this hot pink color there with these spray roses. Sit those right above the mini green. Same thing right here. Even though it's next to a hot pink rose, I've still got a big green gap here that will work really well for my spray rose. So I'm going to go ahead and place this other cluster right there at an angle. And what works here is because we have the two different sizes of heads, it's not necessarily too much. It provides some different dimension with the two different sizes, even though they are basically the same shade of pink. All right, with my final, more delicate piece, I see a perfect little spot somewhere over here. There we are. The next stem that we're going to work with is the last of our kind of branchy and woody thick stems. This is thistle. Should have 3 stems of this. We're bringing in this blue color here with this thistle and a really awesome texture. So I'm going to go ahead and clean off any leaves at the bottom, but I don't necessarily want to break this up. I'm going to leave this guy together and I'll just have him sticking out a little bit more. Okay, now I have all of those prepped. I'm going to start with this biggest guy, cutting at an angle, measuring to my vase. I've got a big gap right here in the center that I am going to use this big guy for. I'm making sure that he is going in at an angle and not upright because he is sticking out a little bit more. I want him to stick out to the side rather than directly in the middle of my arrangement. So I've just placed my thistle kind of evenly dispersed around my arrangement. I've got 1 more in the center and 2 on the sides, just where I felt like I wanted that texture and that color to come through. Moving on to our last 2 flowers. These are going to be the more delicate flowers that we are working with. We've got Scabiosa. Should have 3 of those. And we've got Ranunculus, more of that really cool hot pink. I'm going to start with my Ranunculus. They have a little bit of a larger head and I want to make sure that they have a prime real estate in this arrangement. I'm going to cut at an angle. I'm not going to go as short with my ranunculus. I do want them to pop out and say hello and not get too buried into the arrangement. So I'll place 1 there, and he needs a little extra support. So this is a really good spot where I'm going to take one of those pieces of our seeded eucalyptus that I saved from earlier, and I'm going to tuck this piece underneath of this ranunculus to help support him a little bit so he doesn't sink too much. There we go. So I want to be careful because these are very rounded flowers. They almost look like eyes. I don't want to put them right next to each other in my arrangement because then it will really look like a face in my flowers, and I want to avoid that. So I'm actually going to go onto the opposite side of my arrangement that I placed my first ranunculus over here. So I'm going to place my second ranunculus over here to provide 2 different faces in my arrangement. to our second to last bloom that we're going to be working with is our next delicate stems, the Scabiosa. You have 3 stems. There's no cleaning up to do with these guys. They're already ready to go. They've got really cute bouncy heads to them, and I want to play with that and keep that going, so I don't want them to get too lost. I'm gonna look for where I can use this curve on the head to my advantage, leaving those stems a little bit longer. So when I insert in between all of this texture, that Scabiosa still pops through like that. We are working with 3 of our Scabiosa, so this is a good opportunity to do a little bit of a grouping action if you like that style. You can put 2 of them together on one side and 1 by themselves. I'm going to do a little bit of that. I'm going to keep 2 on the same side, but not directly next to each other. So I'm going to make sure I have them at different levels. Those there, that one there. And now is a really good time before we move on to our final bloom, which is our Cymbidium orchid blooms that are in water tubes. I'm going to take some of the last few pieces I saved of our seeded eucalyptus, and I'm going to tuck in just anywhere where I have any holes or I feel like I need additional support for my flowers, or anywhere where I want more of that fun texture to come through. I'm going to go ahead and finish up with my seeded eucalyptus here. As you can see, I'm also kind of playing with the placement of things as I'm finishing, reaching the end here. I want to make sure that what I want to stick out and show off is sticking out and hasn't gotten too buried. Pulling out some of those rose faces. And making sure that the rim of my vase is completely covered. So now I feel that we are ready for our final bloom of the evening, our 2 Cymbidium orchid blooms. We've already pre-water tubed them for you. And so again, we're working with 2, but I don't necessarily want to put them directly together. So I am going to leave a little difference, but I am going to put them on the same side of my arrangement, opposite of this large kale. So rather than having a triangle that way, with 3 of these blooms, we're going to use our kale as our 3rd triangle point with these orchids. There's nothing you really need to do to the water tube. It should just go in and be supported by the other blooms and the greens that you already have in your arrangement. One thing I like to always make sure is that my orchid is facing upright and not upside down. We want to make sure that it is facing upright the way that it grows. So there you are. Make sure your water tube is in your vase and not sticking out like mine just was. And there you have it. We have a classic Helen Olivia original low and lush arrangement in Bordeaux blues. Thank you. So now you have this beautiful arrangement. What do you do to keep it alive for as long as possible? We stand by fresh water and changing that water very often. What happens as the flower stems sit in water is they do release their oils and bacteria and things inside the stem, and it will prevent the flower from continuing to drink as that water gets cloudy, muggy, and starts to grow all sorts of things. So you want to make sure that you are changing that water as often as possible. I recommend every other day, every 2 days, to be safe, and making sure that water stays in the vase and that all of the stems stay in water. As soon as that stem does drink and come out of water, it will start to close up and prevent it from rehydrating without another recut. So you want to be sure that your vase stays filled with water and the water level doesn't get too low to prevent your flowers from getting too dehydrated. I'm going to show you one way that you can do this. Brings us back to our use of chicken wire as our mechanic. It makes it really easy to pop your arrangement out just like that. It stays together, and then you can change your water, change your vase. Really easy this way. Makes it easy to give it a little snip on a couple of them if you notice you need to. And then it will pop right back in just the way you made it. Alternatively, something you can also do is to just place the entire arrangement in your sink and place the faucet in between the flowers and let the water overflow as well. That is an alternative way to do it. Good luck.